On today's episode, how to screw up a CNC machine. Now the question comes in, is it actually the product that screwed up or was it operator error? Find out right now on this episode. Now today's video is for those of you who are thinking about purchasing a CNC machine and know nothing about it. If you already have one and are experienced at it, well, this video is probably not for you. And now I have only 3 viewers left. But for you 3, we're gonna move on. Now before we get into today's video, I do want to thank the good folks over there at Woodcraft for sponsoring today's episode. Woodcraft has the right tools with the right people so you get the job done right. Before I get going into the meat of today's video, I have a couple of disclaimers that I want to get out of the way with you to be totally open and honest. Now, a couple of months ago, Woodcraft donated to me this CNC machine by NextWave. It's the SD100. Now, just because a tool is donated to me doesn't mean I'm going to give it this glorious review.
I'm glad to hear that.
I'm very, very honest with you, the viewer, and I'm also honest with the company. The way I see it is, how can we improve unless someone tells us where we need to? Now, with that being said, I also want to state that I've got 22 years in the trades and in this craft. However, I am by no means a CNC expert. I make most of my living using hand tools, so this is a completely new learning curve for me. I also want to point out that this machine is their base model. This is an introductory level machine. So some of the problems and issues that I have might not be with a model that's of a higher caliber. Now, if you would like to see what comes with this machine, I did do a previous video, the unboxing of it, and I show you what it comes with and what it doesn't come with. I think it's worth watching if you haven't seen it, and I'll put a link in the description below for you. Okay, and the last thing that I want to be open and honest with is I did need some help, so I called on a friend who is a CNC expert, Randy Johnson. I kind of like to think of Randy as being my co-pilot on this journey and help me avoid from hitting into some rather big walls. Advice that Randy gave me is not only going to help me, but it's going to help you too, and I'll tell you more about that at the end. So, right now, let's get into what the problems and issues that I had initially starting off with this CNC machine. Okay, with the owner's manual in hand, I open it up and right away it tells me in order to run the CNC machine, I have to have a laptop that has Windows 10 capability. And so this was something I didn't have here in the shop, so I recently purchased this laptop just for this. From there, it goes on to show me the first things I need to do is I have to download the software from NextWave, which they call Ready to Control. And to access this software, I'm given a card with a license number on it, specifically for me and this machine, through NextWave. And so I have to get that entered in, and then I'm allowed to download it. Now, the manual is really nice because I can see it's showing me pictures of what I can expect to see on the website with little arrows telling me where to click and what to punch and so on, which is perfect for a guy like me. However, the downside was it seems that NextWave updated their website but didn't update the manual. So the pictures are close but not exact. But at any rate, it was able to get me going down the right path. Now, besides getting the license for the software, I also have to set up a license for the machine. The machine has a serial number and code and everything that has to be registered in too. And this is also so you can get the warranty on it. I believe there's a 1-year warranty on this for any defective parts and so on. And then there's also another program, it's not NextWave, but NextWave uses them, which is Vectric. And Vectric has a lot more bells and whistles that will actually help me do the programming that I want for whatever patterns I want to cut out. I'm going to get into that later. I'm just going to stick with the very, very basics so far. After our software has been put into our laptop, well, the next part that comes into the manual is talking about the actual CNC machine and a little bit of setup there. Now, I gotta say, like right out of the box, 95% of this, 99% of this was all set up for me. I didn't have to wire anything or assemble much at all. Now, Woodcraft at the time when I received the package, they sent with it this DeWalt cordless router. And actually, this is a bad idea for this setup, and here's why. The machine is controlled by the laptop, and the laptop and the machine have their own plug, their own voltage source. The router is not controlled by the software in the laptop. The router runs independent of this. So what that means is, if this cordless router was in here and the battery goes dead, the computer has no idea of that, and it's still going to keep moving the machine around, plowing the bit through the wood, but the bit won't be spinning. So you can do some severe damage not only to your project, but possibly the machine. So this is not recommended. However, on a side point, I love this router. There's a couple things about it that are wonderful. In fact, obviously having no cord to get in the way is great. Second, it's got a great set of LED lights on it, so I can really see my work that I'm doing. And then lastly, it has a brake. It stops instantly, which I think is very safe, because what do? Most of us, when we're done, we turn it off and that thing is still spinning, and we want to set it down because we're looking at our workpiece. So having that brake is a very nice feature. Okay, enough about the DeWalt. Back to this. Now, when you get the CNC, it comes with a couple of different brackets. And the brackets were made to hold a DeWalt corded router. And let's see, I forget what the model number is. The DWP 611, okay? Or if you have the Bosch PRV 20E VS or the PR20, okay? Those are the two models. So this was a Bosch router that was the PR20, and it didn't want to fit. In fact, I kind of had to put a bolt and everything in here to get it to actually come together. It just didn't fit in either one of these brackets. Well, I called Randy, and the reason is this Bosch, even though it has the same part number, this one's old. You can get one of these Bosch today, but it's just a little bit smaller in diameter, and that's what one of these two brackets was set up for. And that's the other one. Like, which bracket is for the DeWalt and which one is for the Bosch? So Next Wave said they're actually going to start labeling these. And if I'm not mistaken, I think they're going to offer a couple of other brackets in case you have a different model router, like maybe a Porter cable. Don't quote me on that. That's just kind of what I heard. So that way it might give you a little bit more flexibility to use a router that maybe you have in your shop. Probably the only other thing that I had to set up on it was a couple of wires to go to plug it in into the computer. Super easy, the directions spell that out. And then the clamps. Now, the clamps are fairly simple. A couple of carriage bolts, and you would obviously put your, come on, fairly simple for some folks. You put your workpiece underneath there and tighten it up. But what I didn't like about these clamps is if you don't have that clamp perfectly positioned on the flat part of it, as you tighten it up, it wants to go down on the side of that, and then the clamp actually comes loose. And that was one of my problems I had. I destroyed a piece in the beginning because the clamp came loose from the vibration. So I'm hoping they might come out with a better version of it. If they don't, just make certain that you have the clamp positioned up here on the flat part and not anywhere on the curve or on the side. And the next thing to keep in mind with the clamping is make sure that the clamp is going to be out of the way of the actual router bit. You don't need it crashing into that, again, causing damage. We'll cover more of that a little bit later. Okay, so now I think I'm ready to do something. I have the CNC machine on. I don't know if you can hear it, but there's a slight little hum going. I also have the laptop loaded up with the Ready to Control program. And so this is what you're going to see when it comes up. Now I'm not going to go through everything step by step, but I'm going to walk you through a couple of things that I found to be pretty important. So just real quick, this here is our control pad. You can see the arrows, and these arrows are going to control the X, the Y, and the Z of moving the router. What are those? I don't know. So if you're like me, you can come up here and we can see that X is in blue. And so any of these arrows that have the blue button are going to move it left or right. It also works on a diagonal. Okay, so that's the X. The green buttons, or the green arrows, well, that is our Y. And so that's going to move it forward and back for us. And then the last one, the Z, which is purple, and it spells it out pretty clearly. This is our up and down. All right, wonderful. We can move our router on the CNC machine. Now what? Well, if you're like me, you want to make something, you want to produce it. And I don't know how to do any programming at this point. This is all I know. Well, luckily, NextWave kind of figured that out for us. And so they gave us a few different projects. Now, you can get to the projects simply by following the directions there in the manual. But I found on this a lot easier way to get to those projects with the direction. So if you come over here, right at the top, we have File, Examples, and Help. So I'm going to click on Examples. And you notice as it drops down, it has a program for the welcome sign, the US flag, a trivet, and a gone fishing sign. Now it says gone fishing 1 and 2. You would think that maybe there's 2 signs for that. Actually, it's the same sign, but you have to change a router bit in it. So there's like 2 different programs, okay? Now, clicking on those will load. Let's see here, I'll click on the welcome sign. It loads the welcome sign program onto the computer. But I'm not exactly ready to push play and let this go yet. So I'm going to come back to the examples. And right at the very bottom, it says Project Instructions. So I'll click on that. And here we go. It opens up, and you can see right away what the signs will look like. Now scroll down. And I'm not going to go through every single step for you on this. It does a really nice job at giving you the directions and telling you what bits to use, what size material, how big the material should be. It really walks you through everything. Very nice. I will say, read every single step and don't skip anything. And the reason I say that is because the directions do explain a step in this and why you want to make sure you do it. I did that step, and yet I still had problems. Why? Because where it was telling me to do that step in the process felt a little early, and by the time I got to where it was relevant, I kind of forgot and it made a mistake. And so let me show you what that mistake is. All right, let's say, for example, that I want to run this welcome sign program. Now, one of the things they tell you in the directions is to find the center of the board. And I'm not clamping this down. I'm not going to run the machine. I'm just simply putting this in here just to show you the problem that I ran into. And boy, what a problem it was. All right, now again, following the easy directions that were on the program, it wants me to get this bit real close where it's just barely touching the wood. And then we have to zero out all the axes. So the X, the Y, and the Z, it all has to be 0. That is our reference point that the program then is going to take over. And if we don't have that, it can be cutting in a completely different area. So in other words, your welcome sign may not be centered on your board. So the way to do that is I'm going to control manually this router, and I want to try and get it to the center of that X. Whoops, wrong direction. See, I'm going to slow it down. There's different speeds you can make this move at. Oh, that looks good. Go down. Okay, so in this case, it looks like it's just barely touching. Now, on the program, I can go in and I can zero out each one of these, or I can just hit this button which says zero all. So I'm going to do that. And it's asking me if I'm sure I want to zero it all out. Okay, you notice now that all the numbers up here, they all went to 0. All right? Now, in the directions, before it starts running, it suggests you lift the router up a little bit. So we'll do that. Now, the mistake that I made on it was I was following the directions and I thought it wanted me to raise it a certain height. And I went a little too far. And this is what you'll hear if you go a little too far up. By the way, you'll notice that the number changed on my Z-axis. You can see it went from 0 to, 0.165. All right, and as I keep going up, that number is going to change. But I want to show you something that's real important. So I'm going to go up. All right, and so I went to its maximum height on it. Now you heard that noise? Sounds terrible, right? I mean, it sounds like you're stripping gears. You're not. You're totally fine there. It's actually a clutch that's skipping, so you're not doing any damage. You're going to hear that anytime you get to the full maximum, whether it's all the way up, all the way to the right or left, all the way front and back. It's going to make that noise. That's not the problem. Here's the problem. So I'm going to go back down to my X, all right, where I originally started from. All right back where I started from. But look at my numbers. I'm not 0 anymore. I'm 1.804. Whoa, that's not 0. And that's exactly what I did on my first project. Let me show it to you. Okay, so you could probably easily see what happened. Because I took that all the way up and screwed up my Z access point, it wasn't at 0 anymore. When the program started, instead of going in like 1/8 of an inch, it went in 5/8 of an inch. And considering this is only 3/4 of an inch thick, I almost carved a hole right through the sign. So I was really baffled by it. I didn't realize what I did, and that was one of the problems. Now, keep in mind, with a nicer machine, you probably won't have that issue. It's probably built in so that doesn't happen. But again, that's what happened on this one. However, the second time through, I did get it right, and you can see I have a nice little welcome sign here. So once again, here's a little bit close up. You can see how deep that router bit went in because the 0 wasn't right. Here's how it looks when it's done correctly. That was because I had that Z zeroed out wrong. I also screwed up on this one. You'll notice that it didn't quite carve the rest of this? Well, that was because I screwed up and forgot to zero out one of the x-axis. So it's real important to remember that step, to zero them out, and don't move the router to the point where you bump it to the extreme limits. Okay, now for the most part, this welcome sign looks like it's really nice, but there was another mistake on this that actually the manual didn't tell you about. I had to find it out on my own. And it's not exactly running level. You'll notice here that when I put my combination square on, it's just barely touching that corner. But if I come to this end, you can see I'm way past that tip of the corner. And let me show you where I screwed up with this. All right, with my workpiece in here, even though I have the point of the bit right on that X, I'm about ready to push play and make this go. Last thing I want to check is before I tighten these up, I want to take my square and make sure that the workpiece is square with my table. Now I can tighten these up, and once the program starts running, it will be level going across the workpiece. Now the last problem that I had with it was I noticed on some of the programs that I did, when I looked real close, it was deeper on one side than the other. Now there's a couple of reasons for this. One, I noticed the one board that I did as a test piece, I had a little bit of a cup to it. Now the computer, it doesn't know if your boards are perfectly flat. Once again, setting it up in the machine, that's relying on us. So because that board was cupped, it would cut deeper in the center and lighter on the edges. If this has any kind of warp or twist to it, you're going to have that problem. So I got another board that was perfectly flat, but I noticed it was still cutting a little bit deeper on the right side than the left. I was pretty perplexed on it. So here's what I did. I found out that the table bed wasn't level. And how did I do that? Well, using the Ready2Control software that I already showed you, I brought the router to this far corner, took it down to where the point just barely touched, and zeroed it out. I lifted it up, brought it over, and real slow, I took it down to where that zero was, and I had a gap. So I just simply put some shims in it to bring it up to where both sides read 0. I did the same on all 4 corners. After that, it was no problem. So that's where I'm at so far with using the machine. I've got the software, the Ready2Control, into my laptop and have a basic understanding of it. I'm able to operate and move the machine, and I'm also able to do some sample pieces. Now, I gotta say that coming into this, having a hand tool background, I really was kind of a skeptic with it. And I'm being honest with you, I'm still not sold 100% if this is going to be something I fall in love with. But I do have to admit to you that when I was getting it to carve something, I just had the biggest smile on my face. It was absolutely amazing to watch the machine go through and do its thing. It's very, very cool. And it carved this whole thing within 9 minutes. I couldn't do that. So pretty impressive machine. So where do we go from here? What's next? Well, from here I have to do a little bit more practice and a little bit more research. And remember, I talked to you about the Vectrix program. This is the program that is a separate company, but it's compatible with this machine. In this program is where I can do my own designs, make my own signs, patterns, carvings, whatever. From there, it's going to figure out a tool path and something they call the G code. And the G code is vital because that is what the Ready2Control program will read, take that G code, and put it onto the CNC. Listen to me, I sound like I know what I'm talking about. G code. Not even. When I first read it in the book, I thought it was G-Force, the cartoon from the 70s. All right, so stay tuned for some more videos on that in the future and see what I design and how it comes out. So I said to you in the beginning that Randy Johnson's advice was not only going to help me, but it's also going to help you. And here's how. Based on my experience, Randy's actually going to go back and rewrite some things in the manual to make it a little bit easier to understand. Randy also too has the book, the CNC Router Essentials. Now I'm reading this book and I really like it because it's very simple to understand. It's not very complex at all. So if I'm able to figure it out, I guarantee you you'll be able to figure it out. And in December, Randy is having a live webinar where you can log on and watch him do a presentation, and he's going to show you not only the basics but even intermediate stuff. So if you think that the CNC machine is for you, I definitely would ask you to check that out, and I'll have a link to all that below in the description. Now going forward with this, not only am I going to try and do some projects, but some of you out there have asked the question, Chad, the price point is a little high on this. Is this something that I should have for my workshop that could actually make me some money, or is it just a machine that's fun to play around with? Well, Randy and I talk about this often, and we're sometimes at opposite ends of the scale on this. And I've asked him that next time he's in town, actually stop in the shop here, sit down, and we're going to have this discussion with you to help you decide for yourself if one of these is something that you should invest in. Okay, as always, I thank you for watching, and if you have any questions on a project you're working in your shop, feel free to write me at woodshopintime@gmail.com, and I'll do my best to help you become a better woodworker. Just don't ask me any questions about the CNC machine. I'm clueless. Okay, keep on dancing.